Together, we work as one for better LGBTIQ lives. Outright.
Well, hello. Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thank you so much to Outright Action International for this webinar and for the honor of hosting this really incredible conversation that we're about to have with some filmmakers from different corners of the world who will be sharing their films and their stories with us. Thank you and welcome. My name is Bev Ditzi. I am a filmmaker. I am a filmmaking activist from Johannesburg, South Africa, and that's where I'm signing in from. And I started filmmaking, about 25 years ago, really more than anything after realizing that, we need to be telling our own stories. And I suppose that's why we're here. And so I am going to be introducing our speakers, and I will start off by introducing them with their films.
Huyu ni Alex, mimi ni Sami. Alex ni penzi langu la maisha. Namuelewa na ananielewa pia. Tunafaana.
Mama toto. Nani anaweza kaaje bila bibi? Lazima awe na bibi. Asikie ushauri ambao tumesikia, hama ile shida ambayo tuko nayo. Aione pia.
Mimi nataka tu babangu anielewe vile niko, ajue life yangu na achane na mimi nifanye chenye najua cause I'm a grown up. Huyu ni mimi nikiwa na umri wa miaka 14. Hapo ndipo nilipogundua niko tofauti. Hapakuwa na mwelekezi katika familia, kijiji na hata nchini.
Sisi tunakanga tu hivi makuti. Wazazi wetu wanajua tunachoianza.
Nguvu zote katika jeshi kama likisho.
Baba yangu aliniuliza uhusiano wangu na Alex. Singeweza kukana. Alikasirika sana. Akaniambia mimi si mtoto wake tena na nisirudi nyumbani.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, how angry is your dad?
15. There is a possibility that he has paid people to teach me a lesson.
When darkness comes, I'm not alone. I never fear the shadows on the floor. Oh, unashamed. Yes, I will stand unashamed.
Hi, welcome, Tony.
Yes, thank you. So happy to be here, Bev, a filmmaker based in Kenya, producer of I Am Samuel. And yeah, I'm just happy to be here in this space with all the other amazing filmmakers.
Thank you so much. It is a powerful work, and I really look forward to engaging a little bit more so that you can tell us why this film and the impact that it's had, and tell us about, the banning and what it has meant for you and for the film and, for the community in Kenya in particular. But before we get into that, I would like to set up for Alberto, whose film is based in Peru, where we know there have been some upheavals. Thank you so much for being with us, Alberto. Can we show your film?
Straight people are here. Sorry. Straight people ruin everything.
En mis sueños más locos pensé que iba a conocer tantas drags que veía por años en la televisión.
Si me lo preguntaras hace unos años, nunca se me hubiera ocurrido tenerlas para empezar tan cerca.
Jamás imaginé que había tantas personas que veían esto.
Veía que todas las drags que siempre vi por internet y que siempre se vieron súper inalcanzables, de la nada, todas estaban en Lima. Sí, acá comiendo mis cevichitos, sí, acá en Larcomar, sí, acá en la playita. Y estaba en lo que, ¿qué?
Oh my gosh. This is a lot. Mothers throwing their children at me even though they don't know who I am.
They're going to probably follow us to our hotel and probably all to our room. We're going to have a big sleepover.
Hold on, Peru, honey. We're getting painted for the girls, painted for the children tonight, painted for the show.
And I heard that Peru is a little homophobic in certain areas.
Está mucho esto de, está bien, puede ser gay, pero no hace escándalo.
I think as gay people, I think we've always been thought of being second or third class citizens. And drag queens are the leaders, the warriors, the people who are so unafraid and fearless.
Siento que soy como una bandera de parte de la comunidad y me gusta demostrar que somos mucho más que un estereotipo, un cliché.
Hombre, mujer, heterosexual, bisexual, transgénero, una mujer como yo, pero somos iguales.
Hay una esperanza. Arriba la diversidad.
Love one another. Love yourself, most importantly.
Siento que todos mis amigos están súper intrigados por el tema. Oye, amiga, ¿qué son drag? O sea, si yo era amigo, prepárate.
And that is Drag Invasion. Hola, Alberto. Thank you and welcome.
Hi, I'm very excited to be here. Well, my name is Alberto Castro. I'm a filmmaker here in Peru. And Drag Invasion was my first film. I've made 2 other documentaries that I'm actually releasing one in January, and I'm finishing the shooting of the 3rd one right now. And yeah, I'm happy to talk about this project with everyone here.
Awesome. And thank you so much for being able to join us as well, considering what is happening in your country, and hope you are safe. Alberto, we'll chat a little bit later. I think I'd like to introduce Bennett Singer and the trailer for Cured.
If you were gay in those days, you were diagnosed as suffering from a mental disorder. Like so many people in my generation, I went to psychoanalysis to be cured.
These are some of the methods doctors employ to cure homosexuality: electroshock therapy, hysterectomies on lesbians, castrations of gay men.
People use psychiatry as a reason to discriminate. Apart from the discrimination against us, it gave us a horrible image of ourselves.
In the early 1970s, there was this growing rebellion against psychiatry, and we wanted to remove homosexuality from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual.
The body of knowledge which claims sickness for homosexuality has to be challenged.
We could not expect our civil rights as long as we were burdened with the sickness label.
Maybe it makes you feel good to be able to say that we are sick. Does it make you feel good?
The body of medical evidence suggests that it is a mental aberration.
There were so many of us that were at the same point. Enough is enough. We're not going to take it anymore. Period.
A number of psychiatrists talked about, why don't we organize, we can make an impact. John Fryer took a step as being the first psychiatrist to say, I'm a gay person, but no one recognized him. He represented all the people who were hiding and invisible. The effect was electric.
At psychiatric annual meetings, there were demonstrations, if not in fact riots. Ron Gold's a gay activist. He got up there and he yelled out, "Stop it, you're making me sick." I told them in my speech, you don't have the right to decide that perfectly happy people are sick.
This fight
was the most important moment in gay liberation history.
More than anything, I think, all three films, starts off a little, well, except for Alberto. I mean, I'm a very big fan of Drag Race. So of course I jumped on this film with so much joy, but all of them takes you on this journey that really starts off making me feel, oh my God, this is so hopeless, and ends off with such hope. Bennett, I am going to start with you. Obviously, I would like for you to introduce yourself, and then maybe just ask directly, why this film? What an incredible film. I was riveted from beginning to end. Why this film?
Well, I'll say it's such a pleasure and an honor to be here with all of you, and I'm thrilled to be focusing on this topic of queer films and activism. I've been making social issue and historical documentaries for about 25 years, and the very first thing I ever worked on was a series called Eyes on the Prize, which is 14 hours about the history of the US civil rights movement. And that for me was such a life-changing experience, both in terms of learning about the civil rights movement, but also seeing how films about these transformative moments can be such a powerful tool. And after working for 5 years on that piece of American history, I was very motivated to focus more directly on LGBTQ plus history, and eventually co-directed a film called Brother Outsider, which is a documentary about the civil and human rights activist Bayard Rustin, and really looks at what it was like for a Black gay man to be inside the American civil rights movement and those intersections and his two lives. It was so radical for him to be open about being gay in the 1940s and 50s at a time when it was such a radical act. And Cured is, I think, in that same tradition of looking at a moment in history, as you said, that was such a transformative paradigm shift, because until 1973, if you were gay or lesbian, according to the medical experts, the psychiatrists, you were automatically mentally ill. It wasn't that you might be classified as having a problem. This was the there were no exceptions. That was the classification. And my co-director and I felt like this was a moment that had never been documented in film, and that if we didn't spring into action, it would be lost to history. In our film, we have no experts on camera, no historians, no outside commentators. The film is told entirely through the voices of people who were witnesses, as with the Rustin film, as with Eyes on the Prize. And so we had historians and experts guiding us behind the scenes, but not on camera. And so that was really our mission, to try to document and chronicle these voices of the people who lived it. And I will say, since we did our shooting, 6 of our storytellers have already died, which really speaks to the urgency. On a brighter note, we did manage to capture their voices, and we had a fantastic team of two archival producers who spent literally several years ending up with footage from close to 200 different archives, which is another whole piece of the story. But it's this process of unerasing history, and in some cases, what seemed to be non-existent or to not be available turned out to be accessible with digging. And one very clear example is the speech you saw in the trailer of John Fryer in that crazy mask coming out to his fellow colleagues within the psychiatric world, which was such a crazy coming out story. Like, in order to be himself, he had to put on a mask. But it was such a powerful message, and nobody knew that audio existed. I sat there at the Historical Society for a day listening to audio tapes in this little box that was labeled miscellaneous audio. And hours later, I found that speech, which even the Historical Society, even the archive, did not know existed. And so I think having that authentic voice and that firsthand material takes this kind of story to a whole other level.
For me personally, and we can all jump in, I do like to have more of an interactive conversation.
Absolutely.
For
Yes.
me personally, just the fact that I didn't know a lot of that history existed says how important it is. I am in the global South. And it doesn't matter where you are in the world. The USA is the leader of the world where everything filters all the way to us. So even though we ourselves didn't have specific psychiatric associations that had laws that said we are sick, we are still considered sick from the same laws coming from your country. And so having a film like this that actually debunks and says, no, there's no evidence, this is crap. Well, I found that very powerful. Tony, I would like to move to you. You are in a country where we've seen quite a few queer films being banned, coming from obviously all the different myths and all the different misinformation that has come, particularly once again from the USA. And then you make a film like this, I Am Samuel, which also ends up being banned. And I mean, we've had Rafiki that was banned previously and then unbanned and then rebanned. Why this film? And what were the implications for you in your own personal life making a film like this?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. And it was fascinating, like watching both trailers, because it actually feels like it's a spectrum that we're on, even in terms of the stories. Like we're all at different journeys when it comes to the LGBTQ plus, movement globally. So I think this is such a great selection of stories. Yes, Kenya does have a history of banning queer content. And that's primarily because the Kenya Film and Classification Board in Kenya, the board mostly consists of people from religious organizations, actually, and very few of the people actually sitting on the board and making decisions are actual filmmakers. So there's an issue, just in terms of, this is the government, we're supposed to have separation of church and state, and it's very problematic when you have institutions, infiltrated by people who have very specific beliefs about the world, based on, evangelical beliefs, which is rooted in colonialism. If you look at the history of like a lot of African countries, I mean, homosexuality was a reality. But that aside, so I mean, there is that history specifically because of the board, but we have, as filmmakers and storytellers, found different ways to tell queer stories in Kenya. For example, even before Rafiki, there were Stories of Our Lives. The film was banned, it won an award at a festival, and then they released a book. They released a collection of books and they released essays. And a lot of other filmmakers have been able to do that. And that's what we're actually currently working on, because right now we're working on a scripted podcast that's going to be distributed in Kenya. So that's going to tell the story in a different way. And then we're also working on a series of essays with Samuel, with a writer in Kenya. So we're still finding ways to tell the story. And I think we've just been forced to adapt. And I would say that was the consequence, just trying to adapt and say that because this institution is compromised, the one that's in charge of classification, it would be problematic trying to fight the ban, but let's find other ways. And, I always try and think about, like, if you have strong, powerful institutions and a lot of resistance, it's also sometimes getting creative about how you can work around them. Yeah, at least that's our philosophy.
What's been the impact of the film so far, Tony? 2 questions. One, are you safe? Is Samuel and his partner safe? And what's been the impact?
Yeah, so I would say that we are safe. I'll start with Samuel and Alex. So as part of our impact, we did relocate Samuel. So that was something that we were working on for like a couple of years, even before we released the film. And we did provide safety and security for Samuel's parents in the village where they live. And Alex had left the country before then. So we worked very closely with Doc Society and Oak Foundation, who provided financial support for the film. And they also helped us with our, strategy around safety and security. And outside of that, we also had legal support because we were very careful about, I think we were just deciding like, how can we color outside the lines? And we were very careful even when we were submitting the film for classification, even when we were releasing the trailer, we made sure our distributor, Bohemia Media in the UK, is the one that released the trailer. Like, we made sure we did not have any copies of the film. However, the film is available, a 52-minute version of the film was released for free across the continent on a platform called AfriDocs. Yes, Kenya was geo-locked, but I hear technology exists that can, be able to go around that, I hear. So I think we were able to do a lot of free distribution across the continent, and we worked with rights groups like in Botswana, when they were actually right at the time that they were pursuing the decree, because the government was trying to overturn the decrim case there. So we had free screenings in different outreach centers in Botswana. We also had secret screenings in Rwanda, in Kigali. We also had secret screenings because we also had discussion guides that we created, and we just distributed it for free because we said, this is what we're giving the continent. Here it is for free, and we work closely with different organizations that reach out to us and ask for materials. And we also created Q&As around different themes, around like parents and queer, African children. Like, how do you deal with that? Like, what's the journey? Because you might not necessarily understand what the journey is, and also just have tools, for discussing things openly. So I would say that was the impact, that we were able to really provide a tool, and also just, a storytelling that people really related to across the continent. And also in Kenya, if people can circumvent the platform.
We find a way.
We find a way.
Find a way to find a way. Roberto, similar situation in Peru in terms of, discrimination, in terms of the homophobia. I think more than anything, I was stunned. So, Tony, thank you for that. I segued and just moved because I feel like I'm moving countries and continents, and it feels so exciting. You in Peru, Alberto, in the global south, where we have really similar situations, just in terms of, the religion, and you have laws in place still that criminalizes homosexuality. And yet here you are, following these incredible drag artists that land in Lima in Peru, and people know them. And there's like mobs and mobs of people. I did not expect that, to be honest. But are you facing, is it similar situation in Peru as in Kenya, for example?
I guess they're similar in some ways, but they're completely different in others. Like hearing everything you were saying, like it's difficult to think about Peru and the LGBTIQ plus fight without thinking about the huge abuses that exist in our country, which is what we are living right now. Like people are protesting right now, like everywhere in the country, and we are close to. We have many dead people in the manifestations across the country, so it's been like very difficult days here. We just we actually don't know what's going to happen in terms of that, but I'm there's like a link between the situation of like economic and social situation in Peru and the LGBTIQ situation here. We don't have any laws that protect the community. We don't have like gay marriage. We don't have I don't know, like trans rights. But but at the same time, it's not criminalized. Like it's not like labeled as like a criminal act to be gay. But you have to consider that Peru exists in I don't know, like Lima is one thing and the rest of the country is another, which is like very hard to explain. I mean, you have to learn a lot about our history. But Lima thinks in a way, and the rest of the country lives in another reality. Like Lima has like the wealth, like the economic powers, like the institutions that control the lawmaking and all that. And then the rest of the country. And that's actually what we are living right now. We are like the rich Lima isn't realizing that the rest of the country is upset right now. So in some way, that what happened with the drag queens here, it's also what happens with the LGBTIQ. I can speak by being a citizen of Lima, that I somehow feel safe. I mean, somehow I know in which districts to move. I know where I can, I know, kiss my boyfriend in the streets, and I know where not to. But I cannot say that that's the same situation, I don't know, in Rimac or in Huancavelica and different cities where people are still being killed, not because the law says so, because, I don't know, a neighbor sees a trans woman and he feels threatened and he kills her. And that happens every day, you know, and so it's difficult to talk about the LGBTIQ situation here because of that, because we are not I don't know, chased by the police. We're not being killed in Lima. So that's why maybe our community isn't as integrated and isn't fighting like together as it should. So that was what was fascinating to me about the arrival of all these drag queens, because it was like a fantasy. I mean, you see a lot of people and you see a lot of fans on the airports and on the streets, on the hotels and everything. But at the same time, when I released the film on theaters and all that here, many of, not many, like most of the press didn't know this happened. They were like, when did this happen? How we never knew that this happened. Like, you know, so that's, we are like on the margins of the culture here. Like we like nobody noticed that this happened. This happened, and only like the LGBTIQ community from Lima knew that it happened, and we all went there and we all lived in this bubble and this fantasy, and then we came back to our lives. And that's also what the movie tries to show. We talk about like the I don't know, the manifestations that we have in June. You know, we talk about that we don't have any laws protecting us. We talk about the, I don't know, like different stuff. We're trying to talk about that. There's this different like stories of Peruvians talking about their struggles here. So yeah, what happened that year was very peculiar, and by showing it, I wanted to talk a little bit more about what's happening in our country in terms of LGBTIQ.
Yeah, I think that, which brings me to the question I wanted to ask, which is what has been the impact of having, I mean, this is one of the reasons we document, right? We document because it looks like only we know what is going on. And if we don't document, you know, I think it was one of my favorite filmmakers who said, if we don't tell our stories, who will? I think by extension, for me, if we don't tell our stories, somebody else will tell our stories, but they will tell our stories, whatever they think is our stories and not our own stories. You know what I mean? But in this particular case, if you had not documented this, you know, it just did not exist. It doesn't exist unless we don't exist until we document ourselves. What's been the impact? Has there been a big impact of the film?
I mean, I'm a pessimistic person by nature, I think. I've been an activist for many years, but the main problem, I think, in our country is that we haven't solved the social economic conflicts yet. I mean, it's not that they're more important, but they have been at the forefront all this time. We've had 6 presidents in 6 years. That's insane. Like we live in constant crisis here, and we are like year after year, protests after protests, people dying on the streets, and even during COVID, we went to the streets, and we had like Congress wanted to take power, and we lost the president, and the president of the Congress assumed the presidency, so everybody went to the streets, and so that's, I don't know how much impact it had like on the bigger picture, you know, like in laws and in all of that, but it did have an impact on the queer community here. I mean, we've shown the film everywhere in the country. I made sure that we could show it in different cities outside like the capital. And what happened was what you're saying, like there have been like LGBTIQ stories told here, but by male straight people, you know, like male straight directors telling our stories. And we were usually like the joke of the film, or we were usually only the victims, which maybe we are, but we were only that. We were condemned to be suffering and sad and, you know, and killed and hurt, and we are. But at the same time, we are so much more. So many of the people that have seen the film, like queer people that have seen the film in Peru, felt that they were grateful that they were seen, and that they were partying, and that they were happy, and that they could live, you know. We know all the struggles we are living through. So when they saw the film, they felt that they could be that too. They said that they had never seen themselves on the screen, and that was unique for them. Because even when we're telling queer stories here by male straight directors, the actors are also straight. So it was like we were breaking off those walls. They were seeing queer people being queer and happy and partying and living and in a country where they felt that they weren't free to do that. So that I think that's like the biggest impact that the film has had. And that's the thing that I'm most grateful about.
Thank you for that. Is the film available? And I think this goes to Tony and Bennett as well. I literally find that whenever I'm looking for one of my favorite documentaries, it's just not easily accessible, as you know how other films you can just either go to. Well, now we are streaming, so you don't go to a DVD shop anymore. But you know, are our films accessible, Alberto? Can I find this film?
Yeah, it's on online on a VOD platform that is called Cine Aparte. I could probably share the link, and it's for like $2 to watch it. Yeah. So like,
please
you
do.
can watch it on there.
Is Cured available? I literally the minute I finished watching all the films, I realized that I would love for my fellow South Africans, for example, to see the work, you know, for their own different importances, if that's an English word. Is it available, Bennett?
I agree. I mean, at the moment, there is a link that we'll put in the chat, which is a free access. It's going to be streaming as of next year. We've sort of intentionally timed the release of the streaming, and it's in the US, it has been on PBS multiple times, but for now, I'm very happy to share a link through the chat. And I'll also put in a link for Brother Outsider if people want to check that out, which is an older film, but I think still relevant. And
thank you so much. Yes, Tony, I think you did say that it is available on AfriDocs. So one can, do you have to be a subscriber on AfriDocs?
So actually, AfriDocs is only available on the continent because we have a 52-minute version that's available for free on the continent of Africa. However, I Am Samuel is distributed, our festival version is distributed by Bohemia Media. So it's available on iTunes, on AVOD platforms like Vudu, Tubi. There's a whole list of platforms that it's available on for streaming in the US. Yeah. So I can also just share those details with Hala and have them distributed. I was trying to figure out how to put it on the chat. Okay.
Okay.
I'll figure out how to do
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm hoping that all our guests and all the viewers, everyone who's here is able to copy and watch and enjoy these films because they are really, really powerful and impactful. I think more than anything, I want to kind of understand from the filmmakers, because I don't think that we make film for each other and ourselves or just for the queer community, unless, of course, if that is the intention, if we're making films just for ourselves. Bennett, were you making this film with the intention of it being for a queer audience? Where did you have a wider audience in mind?
Right.
And
Such a good question. Yes and yes. And I mean, I think for queer people, it is empowering to understand this story in particular. What, as we've been saying, it seemed like such an impossible quest, or such an impossible idea back after Stonewall, like the early 70s, to go up against this monolithic group of experts. And within like 3 years, there was this radical paradigm shift, thanks to these amazing activists and their allies inside and outside the medical world. So I think for queer people of many generations, even people who were alive back then, and certainly younger people, there's a real sense of empowerment in watching this. But it's also our broader audience absolutely is Americans and people around the globe. It's a human rights story, certainly. And I think I can talk briefly, I know time is tight, but about our impact. For one thing, we've gotten several grants to take this film into medical schools. And the goal there is not only the queer doctors, future doctors, but I feel like, for one thing, as I understand it, that the total time spent in American medical schools on LGBTQ health issues is 5 hours across their whole training. And so that was the top line of our grant proposal. And the funding came through, and we have like this whole national tour now where we're taking this film and a discussion with some of our storytellers into medical schools and getting future doctors, and not just psychiatrists, to think about the specific disparities and health issues that affect our community. So that's one thing. Second, we're working with this amazing group called History Unerased, which is so pertinent to all of our work, to create a specific version for high schools. And that's will be distributed in the spring. And again, not just reaching, I hope, the queer students or the progressive states, and we haven't talked about it, but there's such a battle here in America that makes this film so relevant. 30 of our states still allow conversion therapy, for one thing, which is the continuation of the treatments that you saw in Cured, the idea that someone's gender identity or sexual orientation needs to be cured or converted or fixed or repaired. So 30 of our states still allow that. And this film has been actually very useful in reaching voters and legislators in those states that are considering bans. So that's one piece of our outreach as well. So yeah, it's a goal. The goal is quite broad, I think, and certainly connecting the story from history to the very present day attacks on LGBTQ folks, especially trans folks. I think there are many resonances and ways in which understanding this history can empower people in our community and allies who hopefully have an open mind and are willing to think about this as a human rights story.
Absolutely. Look, whenever I get asked the question about who is my target audience, it's always a bit of a humdinger for me, because I want everybody to see my work. I don't just want a specific set of people. Obviously, I would love my own queer community. Tony, I'm circling back to you.
Yeah, I guess if we're talking about audiences, because I think Bev had mentioned that maybe there might be a power blackout for a short while. So I'm sure she'll be back soon. Yeah, but if we're talking about audiences, I definitely I would think that for Pete, who's the director, and myself as the producer, a huge audience for us was actually African parents. Because, this is a story about, a queer Kenyan man and his relationship with his father. And, his father is a pastor, his father has very fixed views. And, there's a journey that their relationship goes on throughout the course of the film. And we really just wanted to, yes, definitely speak to queer Africans, but also it just also happens as a film where they could watch this with their parents. If you are having if you're in the journey of coming out, or if you are, trying to love and understand your child. Because honestly, I think discussions, especially like in religious circles or in schools, that doesn't really exist in the same way that it does, I would say, in the States, where you can actually just talk about like, what does affirmation look like? What does love look like within the African context? So I think that was an audience that we were very interested in and continue to pursue.
Well, thank you, Tony, for continuing with that. And as you mentioned, Bev might have lost power, but almost at the time of our session. So we're gonna hand it over to Alberto and wrap up our session. Alberto, over to you.
Yeah, I think it's, if you're talking about the audience of the film, it's probably the same. It's mainly the LGBTIQ community that watches the film, also the allies. There were a lot of straight women that watched the show that went to see the film. But if I am talking about like when I was making them, I think that these first 3 films that I made had to do a lot about my personal struggles too. Like that's why I made them. I mean, I started doing this film in 2017. I had just moved out of my house. Like, I've come to terms with that, but my family didn't accept me as a gay man. So I rejected everything that had to do with, I don't know, with transness and drag queens. And it was like, because here in Peru, because it's a very Catholic country, you can be gay, but you cannot be loud and proud and like wearing like queer, like, you have to be like a male, straight looking gay man. And if you want to be gay, you can do it like inside your bedroom. That's how this city works, and that's how you know how to behave on the streets, so you are safe. So I had to struggle with a lot of that, like when I was like in those years. So that's why I started when I did Drag Invasion, and I was like a huge closeted fan of Drag Race because nobody knew about that. I was, and that's when I started meeting these local drag queens, and I started understanding their lives and how I was repressing myself. And that's how like the 2 next projects were born too. Like the second one is called Coming Out, which is a very, very, very personal story about me and my coming out experience and how it is similar and different from other stories here in our country. And the third one is called Lima is Burning, which is a very direct homage to the Paris is Burning cult film, but it's about local drag queens. And I'm a huge, like, not only a fan of them, but I have many drag friends now, and I love them, and I admire them so much, and I live with them. I go backstage with them, and I help them like with their costumes and with their makeups and all that. And that's something that me from 2016 to 2015 wouldn't be able to do. So even though I know the film has its audience, and I'm hoping that everybody can watch it and think differently and learn something about Peru and learn something about being an LGBTIQ person here in Peru. But I was also like making them for me and for my own personal journey, being gay and understanding how queer I wanted to be or not. I was like very ashamed to wear some colors like on clothes, and wearing makeup and painting my nails, and I was like, so I don't know how, like, so I was so scared to do that, you know, and that was, and I was living such a sad life in that moment. But yeah, I'm so happy that I went through all this experience with my film too.
Well, I love that. I love that. And when we spoke originally, Alberto, I love that when that film helped you find that voice and helped you get to Lima's Burning, because I'm excited to see that. It tells more local stories, and we're all excited to see all of your work. I made sure to put in the chat all of the links. We will be following everyone's journeys, and Bev texted and apologized for not being able to join the last 4 minutes, but hopefully everyone will be able to connect in the future. And I want to thank you everyone for joining our session. It was a great conversation, and I wish we had hours to chat, but we will find opportunities in the future. And thank you for everyone for joining us on the attendee side. Please watch these films, follow their stories, and it's a new way. It's a great way to learn about our history, our issues, the struggles, and the stories that bring the LGBTIQ community